Just tap that.
No, below.
Okay, great. I'll just say that again. It's an honor to be here. Thank you to the Congressional Voting Rights Caucus. Thank you to Representative VC. And thank you for everyone in this room for coming. We need a new voting rights movement in this country now more than ever. And it's great to see so many people here to begin that. So I covered voter suppression in a bunch of different states and wrote dozens and dozens and dozens of stories about this. And I really believe that the attack on voting rights was the biggest missed story of the 2016 election. There were 26 presidential debates, but not a single question about the fact that this was the first presidential election in 50 years without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. What did that mean in practice? 14 states had new voting restrictions in effect for the first time in 2016. And we saw lots of different examples of the impact. States like Texas, even when the courts ruled that strict voter ID was no longer required, poll workers were asking for it. In North Carolina, even after the federal courts ruled that cuts to early voting targeted black voters with almost surgical precision, that they were as close to a smoking gun as you'll ever see in modern times. Even after that, Republicans in North Carolina cut early voting, reduced polling places, and that led to longer lines and people being turned away. And I just want to tell one really quick story about this that I saw in Wisconsin. Because everyone says, what's the big deal? Everybody can vote. Everyone has ID. Nobody's impacted by this stuff. So I just want to tell one quick story that I encountered in Wisconsin. I told a lot of these stories, but this one really stuck with me. I wrote about a 58-year-old African-American man by the name of Eddie Lee Holloway Jr., who moved from Chicago to Milwaukee. He wanted to be able to vote, so he brought his Illinois state ID, his Social Security card, and his birth certificate with him to the DMV in Milwaukee. He was not issued an ID because his name was Eddie Lee Holloway Jr., but the name on his birth certificate said Eddie Jr. Holloway instead. So he had the right first name, the right last name, he had supporting documentation, but he wasn't given an ID. He was told to go to Vital Records downtown in Milwaukee. He went to Vital Records and they asked him, he said, how much will it cost for me to get an ID for voting? They said between $400 and $600 to amend your birth certificate. Then he went back to Illinois where he was from. And he went to Vital Records there. And he said, I want to amend my birth certificate. They said, we need to see your high school and your vaccination records. He went from Springfield, the state capital, to Decatur, where he was from, got his high school records, went back to Vital Records in Illinois, and said, can I get my birth certificate amended? They said, no, we need your full Social Security statement. He went back to Milwaukee. He got all his documents. He emailed Vital Records in Illinois. He said, can I give you this information over fax or email? They said, no, you have to come back in person. And at this point, he gave up. The net effect was this one man, Eddie Lee Holloway Jr., made 7 trips to different public agencies in 2 different states, spent over $200 of his own money, and still was not able to vote in Wisconsin. And I called his lawyer, because a lot of this came from a deposition he gave under oath to the ACLU, and I called his lawyer 3 days before the election. I said, whatever happened to Eddie Lee Holloway Jr.? Did he get his ID to vote? His lawyer told me he was so disgusted he moved back to Illinois.
No.
So did voter suppression have an impact? Absolutely. I told these stories. But even if it had no impact, the fact that one party deliberately made it harder to vote was an unbelievable scandal that needed far more attention.
Thank you, Ari. Before we go to Maria from Voto Latino, I want to give Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee